All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're happy to be here with TestRigor and Genzeon and reviewing how healthcare can build and streamline automation leveraging AI. TestRigor, as most of you know, is a automation platform that can test in plain English, and Genzeon is one of our wonderful partners in the healthcare and health tech space that is helping optimize things along the way for quality engineering everywhere. So before we get started, just to introduce myself, my name is Lucas Gaffrey. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. I am based out of San Diego, California. I have 6 years in the tech space, and I manage about 20 to 25 US-based partners as well as offices around the globe currently. Some things about me: I'm an avid photographer and solo traveler. I love to just book things and figure it out later exactly where I'm going to go. And I'm also just obsessed with helping teams achieve maximum efficiency and providing meaningful service. And that's something that I hope both of our teams can do for you through this session and through any upcoming needs that you may have. And with that, I will pass it over to Bruno.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Lucas. Hi, everybody. My name is Bruno Mazzata. I manage the solutions engineering team here at TestRigor, and I am based just outside of Boston, Mass. I've been in the tech space for over 20 years at this point, in the automation space for about 8, here at TestRigor for 2. Animal lover, cat owner. And when I'm not helping people streamline their automation and get over testing challenges, I enjoy gardening. Weather's just changing, so perfect. Woodworking. I make my own beef jerky, so I'm a Renaissance man, if you will. All right. So for today's agenda, we're first going to run through what both Genzeon and TestRigor do. After that, we're going to have a little bit of a live discussion, followed by a little demo that I will run through on the healthcare specific application that I have. After that, if we do have time, I'm going to show or possibly just discuss some future capabilities that TestRigor has coming. And then if there are any questions, then we will have a little Q&A session at the end.
Thanks, Bruno, and thank you, Lucas, for inviting us to this webinar. Again, very excited to be here. My name is Pranita Rai. I'm a client partner at Genzeon, and I'm based out of LA. And I've spent the past 2 decades working with healthcare organizations and just helping them transform their digital and AI landscape. I love traveling, and I'm very passionate about teaching kids STEM through interactive means like Legos or Lego robotics. So very happy to be here.
Hey everyone, very excited here, to be part of this webinar. My name is Vishwanath Kowalkar. Close to a little bit more than 2 decades of experience in the industry. I have started my career with developing solutions for software testing in the mainframes world and the AS400, and also been in, throughout the times, developing software for COBOL and PL1 programs in mainframes. And today, I've been talking about doing agentic, using test automation and robotic solutions. It's a completely different world from what I started. A high advocate of doing AI. At the same time, I also feel that human in the loop is equally responsible. From my personal interest and hobbies, I am a big Sputnik fan. I have collectibles of Sputnik and miniatures of that. And I've also recently caught the bug of completing Wordle exercise. It's been a real good thing. Just keeps my mind active, and I really enjoy myself doing that.
So I think the reason why we're here today, and this is a conversation I know, Bruno, Lucas, we've been having, several times in our partnership, and that's why we're so excited to have this conversation on the webinar today, because it's becoming incredibly important for healthcare organizations And the topic, of how healthcare can build and streamline automation leveraging AI is something that, we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's also because healthcare organizations are under a lot of pressure in every direction these days. So rising costs, administrative burden, regulatory complexity, and just the increasing expectations, for digital experiences. And so at Genzeon, and this is where I'd like to talk a little bit about our company, our mission is to help healthcare organizations achieve those long-term measurable outcomes through technology. And we do this by what we call our 3x3 strategy. So in the services layer at the top, we work on AI and intelligent automation, data and analytics, and AI native engineering. But we also understand that technology alone doesn't transform healthcare. And that's why we combine services along with our platforms, which is focusing on clinical operations, HIPAA compliance, and patient engagement solutions. And so, one of the biggest shifts that's happening in software development is the move towards native AI engineering. I mean, traditionally, AI was always layered onto systems after they were built, but many organizations are now embedding AI throughout their entire development lifecycle. And so at Genzeon, what this means is this catalog of services that you see, all the way starting from advisory to product engineering, modernization and migration, quality engineering, which is what we're here to discuss, and IT operations. And because the focus of today's conversation is going to be on quality engineering, we believe that testing and quality engineering are often the biggest bottlenecks in healthcare systems because the workflows are complex and regulations are strict. So when you embed AI into the testing process, we actually will help our customers move faster, but we also help them decrease that risk, which is where a partner like TestRigor comes into the picture. And that's where I think, we have been able to make a lot of impact together. So I like this slide, and I'm going to ask a quick question to the audiences here in this webinar, which is when you look at this slide, which side feels closer to your current testing reality? If it's the left side or the right side, you can quickly type in the words today or tomorrow in the chat, and we'll take a look at it and see, what resonates with you most. And okay, I see a lot of today's. Great. So, and then I can see Bruno smiling as well because he's like, that's pretty obvious, right? And I think it's also because today, the models rely on manual effort, right? And maintaining that big catalog of automation test scripts. So when our clients literally come to me and Vishwa, they're like, how do we increase our automation coverage? How do we increase our test coverage? How do we reduce the cycles? But again, do it with the same existing bunch of people, right? So hopefully that sounds familiar to you guys as well, Bruno and team. And so that's why I think this conversation is important, because this group here truly believe that the QA org or the QA team is obviously the last line of defense. And if there is one team that can benefit from embedding AI in the process, it's definitely our quality engineering team. And so with that, we're here to talk about it and demonstrate it with the help of a demo. And I'll hand this over to Vishwa. Thank you.
Thanks, Pranita, for setting up the wonderful context. Today, as you know, we are talking about this topic of quality engineering and AI. Two things that is coming to my thought. One is, some of the common assumptions and the pitfalls in how a quality organization is run. That is one. And also, wanted to address a real client study story that I, as a practitioner, we have seen that, and how, the influence of a tool like TestRigor, wherein it has, both the sides in terms of functional, in terms of ease, in terms of implementation, how it is making an important role in playing and in joining the dots, in the entire ecosystem of quality, right? So that's something that I'm going to actually be presenting today, right? So that being said, let me start with asking a fundamental question, right? If we are actually waiting for a sprint development to complete and then begin the QA, then we have a fundamental problem. The problem is not on the type of the skill set of the team. The problem is not in terms of the approach. It's a mindset problem, right? When I mean mindset, it also has two things, right? I'm sure in today's webinar, I see a lot of participants coming in from a QA background, some are Scrum Masters, some of QA product owners, some of delivery heads, right? For senior leaders, for them it's ROI, it's the speed. For engineering team, where they're looking for, it's the adoption of the test automation and making that repeatable. And at the same time, it has to sustain in terms of making a big scale. Now, with all this, different personas have different expectations. We have actually taken some of the common challenges, and I'm going to actually take you through this, some of the common factors or the challenges that we have seen in the industry, right? So every time I ask my customer that, like, hey, what is that it really takes for us, defining your objective for your quality organization? The first thing that comes to the mind is like, look at the pace that we are doing it. Like, we still have, a lot of backlog, particularly in agile teams where we have a UI, an API, or a backend, where I see that like, they haven't even started it until they really, went into a stabilization sprint or even a spike that is being, discussed about just before an UAT release is happening, right? The reason being is like, they take a lot of time. They also think about like deployments is also a lot of times it is taking, and they do not have the pace to keep this automation. While there are some organizations, they already have, this test automation team, but they just come back and tell me that like, hey, you know what? I have had 17 check-ins in a matter of 2 days, right? How do you expect that, the testing team, the test automation team can keep up the pace? So that's why I always have a contingent team from the manual, testing to do that, right? So that's a common thing. That's very common pattern. But having said that, I'm going to actually talk about how do we even address that. Like if there is a way that we can even think of reducing this backlog, can this actually be thought through in a different perspective, right? Second thing is because we are talking about healthcare today, and healthcare also has two aspects of it. One in healthcare side, healthcare and the life science aspect of it. All these verticals demand a lot of documentation, particularly in terms of making their work, in terms of the work deliverables, defects that there's been found out, whether it is in form of an environment, system simulating that, or in the process, or in form of collecting evidence. What happens as the actual execution is one part of it, but collecting the entire peripherals in terms of supporting that in order to become compliant, in order to actually, give those parameters for the CFR requirements, for the HIPAA requirements, also even for making sure that like a future audit that happens, there is a way to actually bring that all the information and documentation. And also there are some CFR validation, which takes extreme amount of time, in terms of collecting that evidences. At the same time, the automation happens. So we have not only a laborious process in terms of doing that, can this also be thought of, doing that in a very fast manner, less error prone, at the same time bring in efficiency of doing this in a tool that can actually, tie both the ends of the world, right? Then the other one is a very interesting thing, which also is something that I always find that like this is a very, very unique, at the same time has been a little bit of a myth from most of the leaders. They always feel that like, hey, I have a team, but I still feel that like um, hiring a test automation engineer has to always be skilled. They definitely have to understand an object-oriented programming. They should know about having skills like C++ or Java, Python, or at least to have an abstraction in terms of doing, you know, today's framework like page object model or a Gherkin framework, right? How do I see that, like, when we are having a world where the programming and the logic is diminishing, the design is given importance, the thought process is given importance, is still the way of doing what we have been doing 15 years before, or probably 5 years before. That's not the way that we think of sustaining and developing a scalable QA organization. And that also has its repercussions in terms of skills. But at the same time, if we have to achieve scale, how can I actually get that balance, right? And this is probably predominantly I'm seeing in the product teams, so where large product teams that happens to be disparate, in terms of several different teams, several different, browser combinations, several different, expectation of doing that with various configurations and multiple setup, where we see that like a large set of a large plethora of regression test cases get created release after release. What is the outcome? It's a regression plot, right? Like we do not know how to manage that. Sometimes we even feel that like, oh, do we even have some test cases? We don't even know there is a repository. Now, we have some case studies where we have managed a 50,000 test case repository. Uh, you know, a huge volume of test cases managed with just doing with one single environment, one single tool, and have that deployed across multiple environments. And how do we actually still manage to know what is needs to be tested, given there are pressures that needs to be deployed in the last day or just 2 days before the production, right? Achieving scale, quality is possible. It's not sustainable thing, but those definitely are, one of the, again, de facto things that many of the QA organizations fail to achieve that kind of stability there. Like I already have mentioned, those pitfalls that we discussed in the earlier screen, we had the script automation thing can only be done through, skilled people, maintenance, collecting evidences, weeks of, running regression cycles. We have, you know, a real good advantage of using TestRigor. And that's where I really wanted to talk about how TestRigor comes in and actually bridges, the problems. And as a tool, as the one single tool, it can actually also give a solution for putting all those common issues and also the challenges that we felt that is impossible at one point of time. And we can also think of achieving both sustainability, volume, productivity at the same time, with just in the ease of having uh, it as in a reach for somebody who is not just a developer, it's not a programmer, or not even having an automation script knowledge, but is just anybody who can actually understand English. That is the amount of federated approach which this tool has got. And it has comes with its unique and advantages, which we will be talking about it. But I'm pretty sure that like some of these features which has been highlighted here, English like language, AI-driven framework in terms of abstraction. And at the same time, it also has ability to actually control and bring in self-healing mechanisms, and also collecting evidences, and at the same time go to the minute details. Has the flexibility for the script developer, or in this case, the test case, generator with rule sets that can actually define at what level of information needs to be collected, and execute those scenarios, not just serially but also concurrently, like the way that we are doing it with other tools like Selenium or robotic framework. And also we can think of triggering those using a DevOps mechanism in a CI/CD and CT fashion, right? The outcome is going to be something that we have already seen that in other tools. There is no less comparison, gives that flexibility of achieving all the outcomes. In this particular case, this can also be adopted both by the functional team as well as the technical engineering team. Requires less maintenance, and very helpful in terms of creating documentation, and can also help in reducing the speed of development, and it is also multifunctionary and also gives the single unified way of deploying that for across multiple suits. Now, like I said before, right, I'm going to actually talk about the challenge. The challenge here is a real story that one of our client has already adopted TestRigor, and they already into the advanced level of the utilization of TestRigor. But few years before, when they hired us, and what was the situation, and I just wanted to talk about that. The client in this case is um, a service of a uh, clinical pharmacy pharmacy clinical validation company with services for the CROs. Their objective is, to uh, support an application which is as complex that we can imagine, with multiple different data points, multiple different configurations, which not only gives the complexity of setting up the test cases, but it also gives the complexity of executing several different data combinations. That's the first part of it, because the application is so complex, and it is also a monolith application written in a legacy manner, and it requires every time, every release, a huge inventory of test cases, particularly from the new sprint and the in-sprint test cases, and also the regression test cases. And not only that, it also requires all the extreme level of documented evidence to be captured, and captured at a script level, step level. Any issues that has been fixed, it has to be retested at the defect level, and also has to be revalidated, just to make sure that the UAT has the same concurrence as the earlier lower environments. And at the same time, there was also a requirement to be tested across multiple different environments. There are very client-specific environments. When we say client-specific environments, there are clinical studies that needs to be set up as the way that it has been set up in the production environment, right? And as we all talk about that, like all these things, adds one more complexity is the factor where we also had a siloed approach, wherein a lot of manual testing was happening, and there were disparate preconditions which was written in Excel sheets, and also siloed teams between functional and UAT, and the compliance validation team. Now, we were looking at one or two things which can actually help in making this product engineering team, particularly the team where they can leverage TestRigor. Why TestRigor was chosen is basically to make sure that the coverage of running the test cases, because it had a lot of complex scenarios, and wherein when complexity is just not in terms of executing large steps, but also in terms of validating with multiple data combinations. One setup at one environment is not that same that in the multiple environments. Every environment is bespoke, so it requires a lot of smoke testing and also validation, evidences like we discussed, and at the same time, something that can be quickly understood, developed, and deployed. So the script development, the script maintenance cannot be a one separate task, because the expectation to handle 50,000 test cases in regression is a mammoth task. Now, once we started doing that, we were able to break two things. First, one is, in terms of coverage, bringing the environment setup, where otherwise it was taking almost 2 to 3 days, was reduced to 2 hours. And capturing the evidences, no longer we have to understand that like it's a huge mammoth manual task. And also the self-healing, test maintenance things, which helped us in actually validating some of those regression scenarios where we do not have to make, change at across. One change is actually going to help us in making that unified global change that actually helped in a lot of time saving in doing the test maintenance. So this has given an astonishing, benefits. Like we see this, the numbers are something, you know, very different and a typical product team, right? So 50,000 test cases, 17,000, test scripts were automated by not having any Selenium or Python developers, but it is just done by simple functional engineers. And outcomes has been staggering. Like we were able to identify 11,000 odd defects and reduction of time in terms of and improving efficiency in the environment setup and validations. Besides that, we were able to do a lot of enhancement in coverage. We were able to uplift the coverage from 40% to 75%, and in fact, we still are doing phenomenal, expansion in the automation coverage, despite the fact it is, only done in UI. Now we are planning to do that with non-UI aspect as well. Few things I want to leave today before I conclude my conversation, right? First of all, I just have said that it's very federated because it has got almost English-like language, so it does not require any manual. It does not require any coding, skills. It is as good as to be written like a test case. So it is very simple approach and made the manual team. So if you guys are saying that like, hey, I have a very large functional team, how do I make them to be skilled? So your functional team is your manual, your automation team. So it doesn't really require for you to think and invest in special skills. Second is compliance and evidence. Both can coexist at the same time. The efficiency is not compromised. Yes, there are plenty of test cases, both in terms of smoke and also validation of the environments. That is something that I have seen, and I really wanted to tell that like this has one of the game changer in terms of reducing our environment validation, self-healing capabilities in using AI, and also making sure the AI changes has actually eliminated the very strenuous maintenance aspects that we are seeing that in other scripting languages. And it's also one script, and we can actually make that script adaptable to multiple different patterns of browser configurations using one configuration and one setup given during the time of execution. So it is as simple as that. And I just feel these five factors, this tool has made a remarkable transformation in taking the maturity of automation approach and make it implementable. And at the same time, using the AI aspects, it has given the edge than other tools in the market to make it simplified for quality engineering teams. So back to you. That's the message that I have, and back to you to Lucas and Bruno.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vishwa. So something that we haven't mentioned yet is the QR codes. You're probably seeing them all over like a bunch of the slides. So obviously, if you're interested in learning any more information about either side here, there's QR codes for both of us. So feel free to scan away and set up some calls. So with that, I'm going to talk to the slide a little bit here, which really goes to Vishwa's point earlier about the plain English. So on the left-hand side, we have something, we have a Selenium script. And, for some of you out there that you can read that and know exactly what it's doing. But you also know that if any part of that changes, you need to basically, recreate all of your test cases and basically do a lot of maintenance. Where with TestRigor, the right-hand side, it is plain English. Login is technically a collection of additional steps, but login handles 90% of the typical login flows. But once again, it's all plain English, very, very easy to maintain. So you can have those manual testers or your, business analysts helping create some of the automation. That's one of the best parts about TestRigor. With that, we found out that, by querying a lot of our customers that when leveraging older legacy tools, they can get to about 300 test cases before maintenance turns into a hassle. And when I say hassle, I mean, releasing bugs into production and things like that. And with TestRigor, there's no real ceiling. Maintenance is so easy. It can be done by anybody and everybody on the team. And that's really why you see that line just up and to the right. So obviously, with that, um, next slide, Lucas. With with that, obviously, there are some key things here that I know Pranita wanted to talk about. So I'm going to let her do this one since it's more healthcare specific.
Sure, absolutely. And I was actually looking at, where some of our audiences, what organizations they've come from, and a lot of the folks here working in healthcare IT, it kind of feels like we're preaching to the choir, right? Because we all understand that, while there is pressure to innovate and move faster, it all has to be balanced with doing it within the healthcare guardrails of safety, complexity, regulatory, standards. And so, both Genzeon and TestRigor, we understand that. And the core message here, Bruno, I'd like to leave the team before they move to the demo is that you need an organization or organizations that understand healthcare domain and technology to solve some of these problems.
All right. That is absolutely true. And you can see here once again, we've been harping on this quite a bit, but plain English test creation. So once again, there's no need to learn a coding language or a new framework or anything like that. As long as you know what the actions are that a normal human would do on this application, you can create test cases. Additionally, oh, sorry, go back. Sorry, that was very quick. And then as you can see here, 15 times faster test building. So once again, you'll see the ease of test creation and what have you. We do have compliances built in, and we do track every single change and everything else. So that kind of covers the 21 CFR Part 11. And then once again, there is a self-healing mechanism inside of TestRigor as well. So we probably won't honestly go over that today because everything I have today works beautifully. So no need to self-heal anything. But once again, if a button changes, instead of sign in, it says login or something like that, the AI is going to know that, going to be able to figure that out. And, it should be pretty straightforward there. All right. So there are multiple ways of creating test cases. So you could see here, we can generate them using plain English, leveraging AI to help with that. We can just write them once again in that free flowing English. We do have a record option, both a live mode option and a Chrome extension. And then we do also have the ability to import test cases from a variety of test case management tools. So with that, let's jump over into a quick demo. So I am going to share my screen here for a couple of minutes. And all right, so the first couple of things that you'll notice here is that we have a lot of green, and the green represents success. So all of our test cases here, you can see have a passed status. We also have some labels in here. So labels will help with the filtering of test cases, the execution of test cases. So, you could have regression, smoke, whatever you need to do. Also, in order to help with the CI/CD concept, there's a whole CI/CD integration section here. So if you do go into this, this will have a whole bunch of pre-populated Bash and PowerShell scripts that you can just use to do whatever you need. And you can see that there's all sorts of things in here, executing test cases by UUID. So that's a specific test case, testing by labels, and then once again, a variety of other things. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but let's run through one of these test cases. So I do have one test case here that is leveraging a data set. So basically, we're running the exact same test multiple times with different data. So if I open this up, you'll see here that we do have a bunch of screenshots associated to every step and every page load that happened after that. And we also have a drop down here so we can look at the 3 different patients and how the experience was when populating their data. So once again, as mentioned earlier, login is a built-in reusable rule that just will work depending on what's going on. And you can see here, we are entering our username into the first edit box. We're then entering our password into the second input box or the second edit box. And then we're tabbing down and then clicking login. And you can see here the red box is representing where actions are occurring. And then if we are doing any sort of validations, which I'm sure we have, look at that. There we go. So here we have a validation for this welcome message. Hello super is what we were actually validating here. And then we told TestRigor to click find create patient. So once again, there's the red box up there. So from there, as you can see, we run through the entire system. And once again, TestRigor is very intelligent. It can interact with pretty much everything that your applications have to offer. And as you can see here, we had a birth date that was stored, and that birth date was then entered into our birth date field. And then taking that a little bit further, we do tab over to get over to the age, and then we put in the age. We enter in, or we select the gender from our option there. And then once again, continuing through. So we have, multiple steps here. And one of the nicest things here is, once again, the screenshots. We're capturing every action and every reaction from the application. So if, for example, you click on something and that takes X number of seconds to load, we're going to see that loaded on that next screenshot. And if it does take a little bit of time, TestRigor has built-in timing speed optimization settings, so we can, by default, wait 30 seconds for any element to load or any item to appear on screen. But if we need that to be more variable, or we know 30 seconds is a good start, but we need more time, we could then put in a little bit of flexibility there. We could say, wait 5 seconds up to 10 times until page contains something. So that gives you a variable type of delay. So super powerful. And, there was a mention of multiple platforms and what have you. So you can see there's a button right here that says retest combination. So if I was to select this, I could then pick and choose any of my operating systems or browser configurations that I have, or any of the data sets. So in this case, if I did want to run this test case strictly with patient 2, I could select patient 2, click run. Or if I wanted to change the configuration for my browser and operating system, I could do that within my settings, make changes, and go from there. So one of my favorite things I'd say about just TestRigor as a whole, obviously the plain English and whatnot, but is the variety of testing, or the variety of test creation. So one way I really like doing this is using our debug mechanism. So debug basically opens up a live mode instance of our application. So what you're going to see here is, I'm going to launch my interactive session. The right side is going to be the visual of the application that I'm testing. The left side is going to be the steps from the previous test. So the test that I clicked the debug from, that will load in here. And then I could go ahead and do whatever is necessary. Obviously, this is going to take a couple of seconds, because every time this occurs, you are basically getting a fresh AI agent. So every time this happens, we spin it up and configure it ready for you. So, funny enough, this did not load all of my information, which I was expecting it to, but hey, let's just run with it. So I'm going to just say login. And with that login, it is going to perform some actions. Those actions will get captured in screenshots, and they will be stored down below. So once again, enter stored value username, enter the password, tab, and then once we click that tab, we then click login. And some of these screenshots are just taking a second here to load. I blame my local internet provider for that. But from there, now we're here. If I wanted to do a validation, I could just click and drag over the text that I'm looking to validate. And you can see I just created a validation. Check if page contains hello super. And then from there, I believe the next step was clicking on find create patient. So once again, I'm not a coding expert. I'm not doing anything weird behind the scenes here. All I'm doing is clicking on the screen, and those actions are being done by TestRigor. The best part about this is that everything I'm doing here is being stored inside of TestRigor as a test case. So let's say that I'm happy with all I've done so far. Obviously, that's not much of a test, but let's say that that's all I wanted to do. When I click finish the session and save, that takes my AI agent, frees it back up to the pool, and any of those actions that I did are stored in my test case. So now let's say I needed to tweak something, or maybe I don't want to validate the whole line here. Maybe I just want to stick with the hello super. Then I could just make some little minor changes here. And once again, that's that. Obviously, my live session name, I would probably want to change that to something that means a little bit more to me. But that right there is just one glance of what TestRigor, well, two, because we looked at the test case and then we looked at test case creation. So you saw kind of two different parts of what TestRigor can provide.
This is very fascinating, Bruno, particularly the fact where I have come from the programming world. I can see that how easy it is to blend in that browser configuration, with just one change. If I
Yeah.
have to do that in Selenium, I need to actually do the browser object,
Hmm.
re-invoke that, and then make that as a separate script to run it. But all you have to do is like change that and then rerun that. I think it gives the flexibility,
Yeah,
and it looks so easy. I think that's the biggest part of it.
absolutely. And one additional thing to add to that is, handling other environments and what have you. So,
Yep.
everything that we're doing right now is against a specific URL. But typically you have a staging URL, a QA URL, a dev URL. So do you have to recreate all of these test cases for all these different environments? In other applications, maybe. In TestRigor, no. So TestRigor has a really cool setting in here called Shared Suite, which basically gives us the ability to create parent-child relationships between my suites. So once again, I don't want to have to recreate all these test cases, but I do need them in my dev and my staging and my QA. So then by doing a shared suite, I can specify which one of those suites will be the parent and whether or not I want to inherit things from them all. So that inheritance typically is going to be test cases and rules because I know oftentimes data is going to be different between different environments. So maybe you don't inherit the test data. So that's one additional feature here that really helps streamline, the test creation and once again, multiple environments. All right. Um, so with that being said, I know we have only a few minutes to the top. Um, feel like I do have a little bit of time to show some the newer functionality, but if Pranita or Vishwa, if you want to say anything else before I jump into that, feel free.
No, Bruno, I think there's this, I think the part that is very, important for us to coverage is the adaptation and to the ease of, using those features. As you would have seen that many of you would have seen that, like I'm sure you all have come from a different background and a scripting background. I think
Mhm.
the adaptation of making a script first define that, make that configurable, and also make it reusable
Mhm.
has been all these elements has something that you would have seen that it just matter of few clicks and also making that as logical as possible. I think
Yeah.
that's where I think it is going to make that ease of making this script creation process itself
Mhm.
so ingrained that it does not have to be scripting, but it
Yeah.
also always has to be thought through as a tester. What is that it requires? What are the scenarios? If
Yeah.
we can have that fundamental elements, then this tool is certainly the one go-to solution. I can definitely see that. Thanks, Bruno.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it captures both speed and context, right, Bruno? I think that's what we're seeing with our customers. I
Mhm.
know, that we both have certain customers that we both work with. And it's just like in the past, what would have taken them a lot of time, a lot of people, all the folks that they would need to know how to build the scripts in Selenium, Python, right? I think the low code, no code platform has also helped them to a great degree because now you can really focus on the actual context and the functionality of your testing, right? And that's where I think the power of the platform can definitely help a lot of organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing that I actually missed mentioning earlier, like we talked about all the different ways of creating test cases. There is just the manual way where if you know exactly what you want to do, you could just put the commands in here. And then once again, we have documentation linked everywhere just so you can make sure you have the syntax right. You could also just provide a description of what you want done and then generate test case using AI. And then we could also generate test cases based on a feature description. So let's say that there's a new feature that's been added to the application. So we only want to test that new feature. So then once again, you could come in here, ask TestRigor to create, let's say, 5 test cases that test the new chatbot or whatever it is. And along with that, you can provide us diagrams or flowcharts or images of the application. So it's just providing more context to the AI so then it has a better sense of where it needs to go to do some of these actions. So yeah, awesome feedback, guys. Thank you so much. So with just a couple of minutes, I would like to just jump into this newer functionality because once again, some of those slides we were talking about, AI being used quite aggressively. And once again, a lot of the stuff I've shown today so far, it has AI functionality, but AI hasn't been at the forefront. There's definitely AI pieces that I've been kind of skipping here. But one of the main things is this new functionality, which takes our AI agents and instead of emulating a manual tester with that AI agent, we made that AI agent more intelligent by basically making it an emulator of a AI engineer. So what we do with this now is, and this is a bit involved, but you have a GitHub repo. You would grant our AI agent access to that GitHub repo. And with that access and the information about what you're trying to do, we'll be able to basically make tweaks to your test cases and to your code base in order to make the test case pass. And with it, we create a pull request. So then you can talk internally as to whether or not this is something you want to push. But let me just show you here the log because the log really breaks it down. So we first start off by cloning that repo. We create a branch. We then start the application and then run the test. And then based on the success or failure of that test, we might need to generate changes. And when we generate those changes, we then start the application again. We run the test case again. And once again, we just keep on iterating through this over and over and over again until we like what's going on. We run our test case. Everybody's happy with the results of it, or more specifically, we match the spec that was designed here. And then we create that pull request. Keep in mind, we're not pushing this code into your repo. We're just creating it for you. Then it's all about you and your team looking at this, making sure that it is doing what you want it to do, and then accepting it. So obviously you can see here we have the pull requests, the actual execution themselves of the test cases, and then once again the test case inside of TestRigor that it was trying to get through. So date of birth of a family member should not be a mandatory field in this application. And originally it was, and there's been some changes here and what have you. But once again, even when it comes down to a failure, we don't just say, yep, there's a failure, good luck. We tell you that there was a failure. We will actually, harp on what exactly occurred, show you what that error is. And once again, this is more on the regular TestRigor side, but this just goes to show that, we are trying to provide you as much information as possible, both from the, the pull requests and the AI generated functionality and just the TestRigor execution to give you a better idea of, where do we need to make any sort of changes, whether we're doing it with AI or if you want to, take control of it yourself and do it. So that right there is just the last little bit I wanted to mention about the newer functionality that's coming out. But once again, we have Pranita and Vishwa here. So if you guys would like to mention any final things here, that would be fantastic.
If you have any questions, we can keep monitoring the chat. If we run out of time today, we'll definitely get back to you and make sure we keep the conversation active. Good.
Right. All right, fantastic. Well, once again, that is everything I had to demo. So I really appreciate everybody's time today. I hope everybody got as much out of this as I got, prepping for this. So this has been a blast. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Pranita, Vishwanath, and Bruno for everything, really, and helping enlighten teams along the way as to what is possible through, automation and the tools that are available to them should they decide to use them. And I think something that we can clearly see through the work that we've done together is that there is an easier way, and it is a sustainable way that will help teams grow long term and empower them to be the best version of themselves. And we thank, Genzeon, as well as a number of our other partners from eMIDS, UST, Minds, Grid Dynamics, Capgemini, etc., for trusting us with their clients. But for today and in general, if you need anything at all, if you have any questions about TestRigor, about Genzeon services, what it is that we can do together to empower your team, please feel free to screenshot or copy and paste our contact information that is available, or just utilize the QR code to get in touch with us so that we can move forward the discussion into how both of our teams can ultimately help your team create incredible. So that's all from us today. We appreciate again your time, and we hope to hear from you very soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.